Welcome, everyone. Here we are to another Coach Factory webinar. I'm so excited that you are here. We'll get started in just a moment. We're going to let some people filter on in. We've got quite a few people registered for this one, but I know a lot of people are like, hey, I'll just sit and wait for the replay. We love it when you come live. You get all of the personalized attention. If you're here, I would love to hear where you're watching from. Just drop something in the comments in the chat down there, and I'd love to see who's here because StreamYard doesn't tell me who's here. So if you drop a comment, then I know you are. And if you're here towards the end, you get a $25 Starbucks gift card, a chance at one. I can't give it to everyone, but I do a little number randomizer. And if you are here at the end, you could win that just as a thank you for showing up and being part of this. So anyway, I am coming to you from rainy Dallas, Texas. It has just been a downpour, an absolute downpour, but at least the sky isn't doing the twisties. So I am okay. So Tammy is here from Vegas. Hi, Tammy. I am so glad you're here. And of course, Sean, our executive director of Coach Factory, is here from Houston. Hopefully, I think all the storms were going north up towards Oklahoma, so they're probably bypassing you down there, Sean. So anyway, we are so happy that you're here, and we're going to dive into this discussion about assessments in our coaching practices and how we can enhance our coaching practice with assessments. Now, do you use an assessment in your coaching practice? Let me know in the chat if you use an assessment. Which one are you using? How long have you been using it? Is it helping you? Because assessments are great for coaches, especially when you're just starting conversations with a new client. They can help you understand that person better so that you can explore how to help them achieve the results that they are after. And it also just helps people better know themselves. No matter where you are in the journey of your life, whether you're just getting out of college or if you're going through that midlife, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? Or if you're in your later years, I have one of my clients that I'm meeting with on Friday who is like, all right, I need a new job and this is going to be the last one. So it's got to be important. And I'm like, okay, no pressure. But no matter where you are in your life, self-understanding can help you make better decisions and get better outcomes. And assessments can be an important part of that. It deepens relationships. So let's look at what we're covering today. We're going to talk about why coaches are using assessments, the types of assessments that are available, what happens if you use multiple assessments, how to interpret results for best outcomes, and how these can help you personalize coaching plans for better results, and even how an assessment can help you make more sales as a coach, because they can do that too. We'll talk a little bit about that. Let's first talk about why coaches use assessments. Well, they provide us data. They provide us information. It gives us insights into what's unique about each of us. They tell you what you're strongest at. They tell you how you're motivated. They tell you why you do the things that you do. They also give you some insight into areas of your life where you can achieve greater results, where you can find greater growth, where you can find greater fulfillment. And who doesn't want that? They give you insights beyond pain points. Now, what does that mean? All right, I had a client come to me and we were going to work through her eating patterns. She was going unconscious with choosing food. She would just finish dinner and it's like, well, I don't even remember eating that. It's gone. And I kind of want more. What's going on? But obviously, it isn't about that particular pain point. There's something deeper going on. And so an assessment can give you greater insights to the story behind the story, behind the pain points, behind the problem that a client is trying to solve. So that can be extremely helpful in sort of getting a better map of who you're dealing with and helping them solve problems. It gives you a starting point for self-knowledge. And it gives you this third party report. Now, if a client comes to you and they're trying to deal with a problem, you probably, as a coach, are very well versed in asking all of the right questions. But those questions bring up answers sometimes. And when we're communicating answers to a client about their behavior, about where they're at, about why they have pain, sometimes hearing those answers can be difficult. If they hear those answers from a third party source, an assessment, it changes the dynamic of the relationship. Now, the report is telling us some things. And as a coach, you get to get curious with your client about that. It sets you up as the partner, what a coach should be, as a partner who puts the relationship first and the data on the outside. You can look at the results of an assessment and say, well, it's telling us this. What do you think about that? Opening up a conversation. It gives you an opportunity to find some curiosity, joint curiosity. It's not just you trying to figure out your client. Your client is also trying to figure out themselves. So the report gives you some data points about which you can have some shared curiosity. And when a client gets curious about what's going on with them or what these things might mean in the context of their greater life or just a specific problem, that curiosity, it drives retention. They come back because they're getting answers that are not just going to help them solve an immediate problem, it's going to help them achieve greater results in all areas of their life. My coaching client that I worked with about unconscious eating, that particular solution ended up changing not only how she approached food, but how she approached her relationships, how she thought about herself. So, one problem turns into a much deeper solution when you have these third party data sources that inform what's really going on with someone. It also primes people for feedback because you have some answers. I mean, you're sitting in front of someone, and as a coach, you probably figured out a lot of things. You have a lot of experience, and you want to be able to provide feedback that's helpful. It's also helpful to have a way to prime them for that feedback and to lead into a discussion based on data rather than just an observation that might sometimes be interpreted as confrontational. I've seen plenty of coaching demos when people are approached with something that feels uncomfortable because it's getting at a deeper issue. And there's a part of them that wants to protect that deeper issue. When you have the data on the outside in the third person framework, and you can then develop that first and second person relationship much easier. It creates that first and second person relationship in a place that becomes a safe zone, a place where your coaching client can come back to you day after day, time after time, month after month, and get deeper answers in a place where they feel safe, where they can open up more, where they are more open to hearing the things they need to hear and discovering the things within themselves that they need to heal. And that's where transformation happens. If they don't feel safe, they're not going to take the risk of letting go of a negative pattern. You have to help them find that safety, and that third party position of the report gives you the safe place for your clients. Also, assessments bring clients to coaches. Plenty of times people will get a report. For example, I took the DISC assessment and got the results, and I'm like, I don't know what any of this means. Somebody needs to explain this to me. And I was very lucky to have a coach available who could take the assessment results that I got and walk through it with me because they understood what the DISC results meant. They could provide more information, ask me questions, and then I could come to greater meaning about what these results meant for me. So I got meaning out of the report because I looked for a coach who could help me understand what DISC was all about. Now, for motivation code, our certified coaches are listed on a page. So if somebody takes motivation code and they want an impact session to better understand that, there's an automatic referral there. And many of the other other assessments do that as well. but assessments can create client relationships without you doing anything. If you advertise yourself as an expert in understanding a particular assessment, it could open up business you would have never seen before. Let's talk about the different types of assessments and how they can be categorized. Um, Now, assessments are typically either structured or they are projective. Now, a structured assessment, and I'm sure you've taken personality assessments before. Drop a note in the chat if you have a particular assessment that you've ever done. They typically ask you multiple choice questions. So, or you have to rank something on a scale like Big Five. Do you strongly agree, strongly disagree? And there's a basic ranking for each individual statement. Clifton Strengths will have two very disparate statements, and you have to click which one you more strongly agree with. I had a problem taking that one because I'm like, I strongly agree with both of them. Why do I have to choose? I guess I'm neutral, right in the middle. But does that really tell the whole story? I was kind of curious about that. But structured assessments do provide very easy, clear results. They're very easy for clients to take. It's multiple choice. You just let them know they need to spend X amount of minutes with this, and they basically just go through multiple choice things. Motivation code works differently because it is based on stories. So a client basically types up some stories, and then motivation code, the machine learning goes through and figures that out for them. So it's a little bit different than what some of the other multiple choice assessments do. Um, but there's a different type of assessment called projective, and these require a lot of training. This would be something like an ink blot test, the Rorschach test, where there's like this ink blot, and the client would say, well, I see a dog. And another client might say, I see a cat. And you, as the practitioner or the person who's giving the assessment, you have to know what dog and cat means. You have to know the procedure that goes into an interpretation there. So there is much more weight on the coach or the interpreter of that particular type of projective assessment. But it's really beneficial because it's pulling out all of this information from the client. So you would see, I see a dog. Well, what does dog mean to you? Like you're pulling information out of the client. Motivation code kind of is the best of both worlds, because not only are they providing the information into something that provides a structured report that is easy to understand and interpret, but it's also pulling information out of the client in the form of their stories in order to provide that structured report. So it kind of gives you the best of both worlds versus structured versus the projective assessments. Now, there's other different ways that we could categorize assessments. There are state-based assessments, or there are trait-based assessments. Now, a state-based assessment might be something where you're analyzing where somebody is in how they're feeling. What mood are they in? If they're dealing with anxiety, how anxious are they? But it's a state that they're feeling, it's a state that they're in rather than a trait. A trait would be a longer term thing, how your personality operates, how you are intrinsically motivated. These things are consistent over time, whereas a state based assessment is something that changes over time, because you are not your emotions, right? You are not how you are feeling. That is not who you are. Whereas a trait based assessment is looking at who you really are. I used to joke that states or emotions are kind of like they're transients. They're kind of like move into your hotel of your mind and trash the place for a little bit and go on to the next place. They don't stick around. And sometimes, thank God for that, right? So, emotions, feelings, situations of how somebody is in a moment changes over time. There is a risk of using multiple assessments, and we should talk about that a little bit. I have taken, of course, motivation code, and I took Clifton Strengths. And interestingly, they use the same words. They my secondary dimension is influencer. But when I took Clifton Strengths, they talk about influence without the R, and they talk about it in a much different way. So when I first got the reports and I'm looking at that, and of course I'm comparing it to motivation code a little bit, and I'm like, why is my influence so low? This doesn't make sense to me. I did sit with a coach who took me through the debrief on it so I could better understand it. And then I understood that the terminology is not necessarily the same, and how it's playing out in my life isn't exactly the same. My Clifton Strengths relationship areas are extremely huge. So then, if I look at the context of my life and how this plays out, I like to influence people to be empowered. So I might have a coworker who's exceptionally good at something, but I could see that they could have greater fulfillment in it. They could be happier. They could see how great they really are. And so I use my influencer in order to empower them. So you can see how the same type of motivation is and strengths are ranked differently based on the different terminology. Now, if I was a brand new coaching client and a coach gave me both of these assessments, that would throw me. And especially if I didn't have somebody helping me to understand how this works in the context of my life. So it's very important that when you're starting with a client, you don't throw too many assessments at them, maybe just one to give you. Well, obviously, we don't want to overwhelm our clients and we don't want to dilute the results. We want them to better understand themselves. So, but as you're working with someone over the course of months, a secondary assessment can be exceptionally helpful to help you better understand who you really are. Quantity doesn't necessarily mean quality, but there are sometimes benefits to using multiple assessments, because sometimes these results can corroborate each other and in interesting ways, much like how Clifton Strengths and how Motivation Code helped me better understand myself. They corroborated the fact that I love empowering people, educating people so that they are empowered, and these assessments can be really helpful with what they call, and I think it's an LP term. I'm not that far along in my training, but my husband used to say this term all the time, that he was a consistent convincer. He needed to be told multiple times that something was true and in multiple ways. So some people are like that. They'll get an assessment result and they'll take a look at what the results are saying to them and they'll question it. Is this really me? I don't know about this. This doesn't really seem right. So if somebody is having a hard time really understanding themselves, secondary assessment can help with this type of person where they need to hear it. They need to hear the same information multiple times and in multiple ways. So if you have someone like that, a secondary assessment can be supportive. But again, remember that we need to provide context. We need to provide translation in those impact sessions, in those debriefs, so that they can understand how this report is living out in their lives. You also need to know what's the purpose and objective of each assessment. Like, what is it really trying to tell you? What does it want you to walk away with? Now, of course, motivation code is there because it would really like to tell you how you're motivated intrinsically, because this is going to help you find greater fulfillment in your life. Whereas Clifton Strengths is like, well, this is where your strengths are. This is where you're strong. This is where you're going to find the greatest success. But oftentimes, greatest success isn't the greatest fulfillment. So, being able to understand that each one of these assessments are going to come to you with different objectives. They're trying to get a client to a specific place, and not all of those places are the same. As a coach, it's your job to understand the holistic person that you're coaching and understand which assessment is going to best bring them to that place. So, can you measure progress through assessments? Now, the state based ones might be helpful. You might be able to measure somebody's level of anxiety or level of depression or level of any kind of emotion that they're feeling, anger, frustration, um, feeling stuck. All of those state-based things are things that you can measure some kind of transformation, measure change over time. But the assessments that are more trait-based, those typically don't change. Now, I did some research on this, and there are times when things change. Now, in I think it was 2018, I took the Enneagram, and my top, well, they don't call it a dimension, but the top Enneagram that I was achiever. And I look at my report now, and I don't feel like that's me. My top 3 were pretty like, they were ranked very closely in how they were scored, but I felt like my 3rd one now. But again, I've been through a lot of, let people change over time, right? They go through life experiences, they change. Measuring progress through assessments can be really helpful in solidifying with a customer their capability to grow, their capability to change, that they aren't stuck. So if somebody is coming to you and they're having a certain situation and you measure that with an assessment, and it could even be an assessment that you do. You could even have a form on your site where you ask them specific questions and then have them answer those same questions in 3 months. You can demonstrate the fact that people grow, people change. You have the resources within you to make a change in your life, because we're not just like ending the coaching and like, okay, one problem is solved. Really, what we're trying to do as coaches is to empower people to live their life from a resource based place where they understand who they are, how they're motivated, what fuels them, what their strengths are, so that they can, in the future, access those resources within themselves in order to live a better life. So obviously, this doesn't work for all assessments with measuring progress, because a lot of them are measuring those intrinsic things like motivation code. I don't think my motivation code is ever going to change. It just kind of flows in a different way. Like learner is my lowest motivation, but I love to learn. And I was like confused on that. But I'm like, oh, well, if I'm not learning for a purpose, yeah, I don't care. I don't care to learn how to fix a car. Will never care to learn how to fix a car. But I do want to learn about human potential. I want to learn. I'm learning right now both motivation code, going through that certification process, as well as NLP certification, because I want to help people find greater empowerment. So that's my vision. My visionary primary dimension is at play as I'm learning, so I can do all of those things. So people do change. They do change in some ways, but those underlying motivations typically will stay the same. Now, how do you help a client once they're taking an assessment? How do you help them? Um, you need to involve the client, obviously, in the interpretation. You may have your own interpretations as you are looking over a client's report. You're going to see patterns, you're going to see signs. You're probably going to get very curious and interested, but it's really important that we let the client lead that conversation, um, guide them in their own self discovery. Because if somebody looks at something and says, I think this might mean, what do you think? Then it's a perfect time to have a conversation and dig deeper. Well, why do you think that way? What what is this bringing up for you? Is there an experience that you've had that basically elucidates that particular result in your assessment? It's a great time to ask very vague questions and let the client tell you what they think. Um, and then, of course, you can guide them in terms of the terminology. What does it mean to be an orchestrator? What does it mean to have high relational Clifton strengths? What does it mean to be an Enneagram achiever? All of those types of definitions are things that you can provide. But in terms of how this is playing out for the client, it's so critically important that they come to some conclusions themselves. When I am a client of a coach, there is nothing I remember more than when I am led to an insight that comes from me. When I have oh my gosh, we worked on this one particular problem, and because we got rid of that thing, all this other stuff opened up for me, and this is what I think about it, and then diving deeper with that with my coach. that kind of experience that's more Socratic, where you're asking lots of questions of your client, can be incredibly powerful because they own the insight. They get the insight. They get the experience. It's within them. It's not something that you're telling them necessarily. For example, my coach, I was talking about my husband, and he's gone through some issues with his health. And I have this one picture of my husband that is very meaningful to me. I call it peak Mark because he's so happy. He's taking care of himself. He's happy. He's just got this huge smile on his face. And I'm telling my coach about this. And my coach asks me, well, what does peak Kathy look like? Like, I don't even, I'm going to have to sit with that one. It took a few days of sitting with that question. But once I had the answer, and I found what peak Kathy looked like, I transformed. So just asking one question and pulling it out of a client can change the entire game for them and bring them to a deeper transformation. One thing also I want to mention is that it's important for us to look for negative bias. I don't know if you are like this. I am like this, but I am very self-critical. I know a lot of achievers. I even know a couple of learners who are a little self-critical and held themselves to extremely high standards. Many people do this, and they'll get a report and they'll immediately go to the bottom of the report. What am I not strong at? What am I bad at? Where am I blocked? So they're going to do it. And it's your job to look for that and reframe things in a place that they can find empowerment, where they can find opportunities for growth rather than criticism. We can leverage that third party data position to deepen curiosity together, because that's what it's all about. It's really about having a stronger relationship with your client so that they can find the insights that they need in order to affect change and positive growth in their life. So it's really important when somebody is taking that assessment, schedule a debrief pretty soon, because you don't want to wait 2 weeks. You don't want to wait with them looking at the report. And, the achiever is going to take the report, read every single word on it, and come to their own conclusions as fast as possible. We want to be there for those conclusions so we can guide them into a place where they are positive about their life, where they are empowered, where they see opportunity, where they find opportunities for growth. We want to contextualize this all to what they are trying to accomplish. And we want to balance those like lower scoring things and look at them as opportunities for growth, opportunities to move forward, opportunities to achieve the outcomes and the results that someone are after. Now, it's really easy, with all of these assessments, they categorize things. And it's very easy to say, oh, well, that's because you're an achiever, or that's because your relations score in Clifton Strengths is so low. Avoid putting those clients into boxes, because just because you might be low on something doesn't mean you can't do it. Doesn't mean that it doesn't play out in your life somehow. Uh, on Myers-Briggs, I'm extrovert sometimes. Obviously, I'm here, but sometimes I'm an introvert, and sometimes I'm just like weekends and nobody calls me. Thank you. I'm fine with that. I can be very introverted. So putting somebody in a box and saying, "Oh, well, look, Kathy does all of these things, and she's got the E on the between the extrovert introvert on Myers-Briggs. She must be an extrovert." Let people have some freedom and flexibility to move out in and out of those boxes. Sometimes I want to step into my extrovert mode. Sometimes I want to step into my introvert mode. Sometimes I want to be a learner. And that's my lowest dimension on motivation code. But sometimes I want to get lost in a book for a purpose. So don't put your clients in boxes. And if they are starting to put themselves in a box, it's really important to show them freedom and flexibility, because they're going to find more resourcefulness in themselves if they have freedom and flexibility. Of course, with all of these assessments, these are tendencies. These are not labels. And it's important that we look at someone holistically. And this, in so doing, just builds rapport, builds and deepens your relationships with your clients. Now, some questions we can ask before a client takes an assessment, just kind of gauge where they're at and also kind of prime them for the experience. What are you hoping to get out of this? What do you expect from the results? That's always an interesting one. And then, of course, have they taken any previous assessments? Because they might be going into the assessment with some preconceived notions. Of course, answer any questions and concerns, and also remind them of the area they're focusing on. What are they trying to do? What's their goal? What's their objective? What outcome are they really looking for? And then afterwards, some questions that you can ask. What surprised you? What didn't surprise you? What are the good things that this is telling you? And what opportunities do you see? And if they have any kind of negative feeling about what the results are saying, you can ask them, well, who would you rather be? You know, if I got a motivation code report and I was like really into like learning something and I saw learner so low, I'm like, why is my learner so low? And of course, I've been coached into understanding why my learner is lower. It does have a big play in my life, um, but it helps me understand things. So understanding who somebody thinks they would rather be and why is just an opportunity to deepen that connection and better understand who you're talking to. Of course, once you have an assessment, it allows you to, rather than have a cookie cutter coaching experience, you can personalize that coaching experience directly for the client that you're working with. You can set more measurable goals. And if you know how they're motivated, tying those goals into their motivation so they can find deeper fulfillment, that is a huge win. You can reframe outcomes with agreed upon results. Because they're better understanding of who they really are, they're going to be able to tie into all of that better. And it might even change what they're coming to you for. They probably aren't necessarily going to find the solution all on their own, but they might say, I thought I needed help with my eating issue, but what I really need help with is some issues with my husband. And it might change the conversation altogether. You can design strategies with them that are going to leverage their strengths, leverage their motivations. And you can approach the entire conversation holistically for the client. You understand better who they are, especially after that debrief session, where they can provide greater texture to the results and how they are interpreting the results. You can tailor the interventions that you have to their unique needs. If you're talking to a client and you're trying to help them find more resourcefulness within themselves and they are an achiever, you're going to want to tie it into their motivation for recognition, their motivation to be unique and get things done that no one else can do, because your intervention is going to be much more powerful when it is tied to that individualized motivation. Maybe you go to a tertiary dimension and bring some of those motivations in as well, and then really create something that affects change in their life, because that's really what they're here to do. They're not necessarily there for you to solve a problem. They're there to help you solve them, solve something with me so I live a better life, so that I have the resources within me to make better decisions, to choose better things, to think about myself better, to have better relationships, to not go unconscious when I'm eating, whatever it might be. They're looking for a better them, not just a solved problem. Now, Motivation Code does impact sessions, as I think I mentioned previously. You can take a look at that URL there, and you can take a look at what impact sessions are all about. If you are a certified coach, we basically take any request for an impact session and we refer those to our certified coaches. But those impact sessions are kind of like those debriefs, those interpretation meetings. Really important that those get done fairly soon afterwards, so that people can better understand themselves. Using assessments in sales. This works. I know it works because Tony Robbins does it. And everything Tony Robbins does seems to work. He is just like the perfect case study of a coaching business. I keep looking at what he does. So he uses DISC in his sales process. So if you go to him for any kind of coaching type of thing, he uses DISC. And you get basically the free assessment and a free kind of impact session with DISC. And they basically make sense of it. And thank God they do, because DISC is I didn't understand it. I got the results back and I'm like, well, I kind of see how this aligns with motivation code, but I don't understand the deeper meaning here. So they do that assessment, and then they talk to you about the assessment, study the results with you, and then ask you tons of questions that lead you into a sales conversation. I found it fascinating and made a friend from doing it. So it was a very, very interesting experience to do that. When you have a conversation, and again, you're in a sales environment, but you have this third party situation, what does it do? It allows the first and second person positions in a conversation. It allows that to deepen. It allows the conversation to be about the client. It allows the conversation to be more meaningful because the data's over here. There's no judgment. There's no analysis. There's no you should. There's no, well, I think you are. It is just a conversation where you're both turning your focus to the third person and analyzing what's there. All right. So motivation code certification, it of course adds credibility to your offering. You get listed on that certified M Code coach directory. I'm going to be there soon because I'm doing my impact sessions. I'm very excited about that. And you also get access to impact sessions for clients through those referrals. And executive certified coaches can earn up to $7,500 for conducting team workshops. I'm going to just mention, since I'm mentioning team workshops, a little thing that I wish I had a slide about, because teams are so critical, especially if you're a coach in any kind of business setting, helping people understand themselves so that they can work better with others. And then doing these team workshops where people are learning more about how other people work together, like, you have maybe an achiever and let's just pull an orchestrator, and they're working together. How do those things, those different motivations, work together? If you're doing impact sessions, it's really important first to do, I think, an impact session with an individual, because if they don't understand themselves and what motivates them and what's going on with them, if they don't understand themselves and you're talking more about the team, it's just going to get extremely confusing. So even if you're not using motivation code and you do any kind of team coaching using assessments, make sure you talk to individuals and do one-on-one sessions first so people really understand themselves before you throw them into a team dynamic and then have to understand everybody else, because people are going to understand when they understand the context of the assessment for themselves, they understand the context of the assessment for other people after that, but they have to understand it for themselves first. Like if I just got to learn all of my teammates' motivations and I didn't understand my own, then I would be too like second person focused. I would be like, oh, well, so and so is this, and so I need to be more like this so that I can fit into there. And they don't have the opportunity to really own who they are. So if you do team workshops at all, make sure you pay attention to the individuals, because that is so critically important, because those individuals might get moved to a different team. And if they never fully understand themselves, or they learn more about their team than they learn about themselves, really not doing that great of a service for the people that you're working with. And it's going to impact the team. It's going to negatively impact the team if someone isn't bringing their A game. But M Code certification is one of the best ways that you can supercharge your business, because it is just such a dynamic assessment. And I hope some of my discussion about that helps you better understand that. And if you haven't taken the M Code, you can get it for $14 right now with the coupon code CoachGo. And if you want to upgrade to the premium report, it gives you much more detail. And if you want to talk about your results, you can just reach out to me, or you can reach out to Sean, and either one of us would be happy to just talk to you about. I'll talk to you about anything having to relate to your coaching business. I just had a call the other day with someone, and we talked about not only marketing, but some of the cool things that she was doing. And I just love learning about you and what you're doing and how we can be of better service to you. And if you have an M Code report that you want some insights on, I am happy to do that with you as well. So go get your M Code report and let me know what you are. And if you know what you are, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear what your primary motivations are. And if any of this was helpful to you, I am going to be doing neurolinguistic programming for report in the coaching business, just the basics. I've been using NLP. Here's my big secret. So my mom was a salesperson, and she had this book on NLP when I was in high school, and I read it because I read everything. And it was all about like building rapport with people. And I was like, okay, this will be helpful to talk to boys because I don't know how to talk to boys. I didn't know what it was, but I learned all of this stuff like super young. Then I meet my husband, and he's taking all of this stuff and he's changing people's lives. He was coaching athletes, CEOs, some celebrities. I'd walk in the room and then he'd shoo me out, but I know who that is on the phone there. Oh my gosh. It was very, very interesting. I have seen people's lives change. I have seen very public people's lives change. Very, very interesting. I am now learning NLP, certifying myself. But here's the one thing that I've learned. If you are not practicing NLP, if you are not in the habit of practicing NLP, it is not as helpful because it's all just theory. It's kind of like having weights on the other side of the living room that you haven't lifted in a week. Not that I'm not doing that. Okay, I guess this is Kathy's confessional hour. I haven't lifted weights in a week. But you have to lift the weight of neurolinguistic programming. And when you do, you better understand people. It's not just going to help your coaching business, it is going to help your relationships with so many other people as well, your kids, your spouse, the people that are checking you out at the grocery store. It will help with everyone. So we're going to go on, we're only going to limit this to 10 people. So very limited. It is 100% free. We're going to go over sensory acuity. We're going to go over eye accessing cues, matching, mirroring, leading, and pacing, all very important in coaching setting, and anchoring. All very, very helpful. And if you want to sign up for that, there is the link. Just go to coachfactory.com, NLP basics cohort with some dashes in there, and you can sign up. I will reach out to you to just get some more information from you, but it's going to be very hands-on. We're going to do some breakout sessions and really get to practice this so that you can go back into your life and your coaching practice and practice even more, because NLP is all about that. All about that. All right. And just keep in touch with us. We're on social media. Join the Coach Factory community on Facebook. We do have a private community that's launching soon for the certified coaches. So if you're going to go that route, you'll get even more hands-on attention. But we'd love to see you in the Facebook group. It's a place where you can ask meaningful questions and get meaningful answers and see some of the content that we create in order to help you supercharge your coaching business. All right, looks like we have some questions. Looks like Sean is answering some of them. All right, so Tammy, you have manifesting generator. I know those words. That is human design, isn't it? Yeah, I think I'm a manifesting generator too. Can you tell I've taken all of the assessments? Yeah. It's really interesting. I love that their whole human design is based on it's based on partially on astrology, but it's based on something else as well. And then there's this other modality beyond that called the gene keys, and that's even more interesting. So it's hard to figure out though. I got to hire a coach to help me figure out all of that. But manifesting generator is super interesting. I am that as well. We are like, I guess, really great at starting things and getting things going and maybe not finishing them, but I'm getting better at finishing things. But yeah, human design is super interesting. And Sean is learner, influencer, achiever. Nothing is resonating more deeply than seeing how those three show up. Yeah. Yeah, I am with you on that. I am a visionary, influencer, and achiever. And I am definitely not an orchestrator or an optimizer. The more I sit with my motivation code report, the more I'm like, I did a ton of orchestrator and optimizer, all the stuff running my husband's business, but I could do all of that. I can do all of the dimensions, but I did it for the higher purpose. I could tie it into my visionary influencer because I believed so strongly in the work that my husband was doing that I could do anything. I could unhack websites and all of that. All right. Thanks for showing up, Alfredo. I'm so glad that you were here. We will see you later. We're going to wrap up pretty quickly. Tammy, thank you so much for being here. Anybody else that's here, you better get into the chat right now and let me know that you're here. Otherwise, you're not going to be eligible for that Starbucks drawing. And Tammy, you're here. So I know you're here. Anybody else that's here, just let me know. I'm going to look for any other questions. Sean, are we seeing any of the other questions? Because I know you watch the chat pretty closely. Nope, I think that's it. All right. Well, I am so glad that you guys have been here. Definitely, if you have questions about assessments, I'm here. If you have questions about anything, you want to talk about your marketing and how to tie your marketing in with M code. Just had a conversation with a coach about that the other day. That was very, very fascinating. Anything at all. I have had tons of experience. I ran my husband's business for 15 years and did all of the orchestrator stuff and all of the marketing stuff and all of the things except the coaching. So I am happy to share all of that experience of what works, what didn't work. So just book me for that VIP session. And I hope this was helpful. We will see you next time. Stay on that Coach Factory VIP list because you'll get notified first when we have a new session coming on. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.